Well, joining me now to discuss the latest on this disturbing story is Victorian Shadow Education Minister Jess Wilson. Jess, thank you for your time. It's been such a big week in your state, especially on this story, considering the accused offender is operated in Melbourne. There have been many suggestions, as I pointed out there in the editorial, for cleaning up the childcare industry. And, I mentioned some of these: banning blokes, banning mobile phones, installing CCTV in bathrooms and nappy change areas. But what reforms would you like to see?
Well, thanks so much, Caroline. And from the outset, can I just share in absolute my dismay as to what has been occurring this week? As a mum like you, my heart bleeds for the families who learnt this week that their children were subject to alleged abuse, and now more than 1,200 children in Victoria are subject to infectious disease testing. It almost makes you want to vomit. It is just awful, and my heart goes out to those families. But you're right, the system is not working. There have been systemic failures, and we now need to see reform taken urgently. And that's why we've called this week for the Victorian Labor government to recall the Parliament, to make sure that we can immediately put in place reforms that will protect vulnerable children in childcare. And you've spoken to some of them. CCTV in childcare settings, to make sure that we have that deterrent and that the police have what they need, God forbid, they need to follow up. Of course, we want to see a register when it comes to childcare workers. At the moment, you can work in any childcare centre in Victoria, and if you're an educator or a worker or just one of the staff members, there's no registration system, so you can move around. We need a register to make sure that we can keep a tab on where people are going and be alerted to those red flags quickly so we can act on them. We have seen time and time again recommendations from reviews telling us that this is what we need, and the government has failed to act.
Yeah, you'd think a register would be at the very least, and the simplest first step that a government could take on this issue and the industry could take. Look, there's also been backlash over the appointment by the Allen government of the former South Australian Labor Premier Jay Weatherill to lead Victoria's childcare inquiry. After all, let's remember that Weatherill was the leader during the worst child protection failure in his state's history. That included a carer who was convicted of abusing 7 kids aged 18 months to 3 years old. Victorian opposition leader Brad Batten has slammed this appointment. Let's take a listen.
Jacinta Allen, if she won't do the right thing, then I'll say to Jay Weatherill, you should do the right thing. Step down and move away from this. You cannot think that the community will have faith in the process when they've appointed a person to lead the investigation who was the one that oversaw the worst crisis and was forced to apologise as the Premier in South Australia. It makes no sense.
Jess, I know you've also been critical of this appointment. Tell us what your concerns are with it.
Well, what we've seen is the politicisation of the urgent review that the Allen Labor government has put in place. They have chosen to appoint a political ally in former Premier Jay Weatherill, someone who oversaw, when he was Premier, the worst child protection issue in the state's history, instead of focusing on what they need to do, and that is restoring trust in the childcare system here in Victoria. But instead, what the Premier has decided to do is put in place a political ally in Jay Weatherill who will help manage the fallout of this, rather than providing the confidence that the review is going to deliver what Victorian families expect and need from their government in terms of safety in childcare centres. If we just look at the Working with Children's check history, the government was warned in 2022 by the Ombudsman that the system was not up to scratch. Yet they did nothing about it. This is the issue, Caroline. We could recall Parliament today and pass immediate reforms. But now we have in place a politicised review that is going to take weeks to report, rather than putting the safety of our children first and acting now to put in place the reforms that will make sure that we are putting the appropriate safe guardrails around our childcare centres.
Surely there's nothing more urgent than this. And you just think of all these families, especially in Melbourne, who now feel fearful of dropping their kids off at care just because of these stories that are coming out. Surely they can make these reforms happen as soon as possible. But look, let's move on now to your own party, Jess. And leaked WhatsApp messages have revealed this internal war that's brewing over gender quotas among senior Liberal figures. Look, the party has obviously long been accused of having a women problem. Now it appears there's a big divide over a petition that was created to introduce gender quotas. You're a Liberal woman, you got there without quotas, but what's your view about them? Do you think the party needs them now?
Well, I personally don't support quotas, and I don't like the debate being framed around quotas versus merit. I think that we need to do a lot more to attract women into the parliament, to attract women into our own ranks, and to make sure that we're reflecting modern Australia and our local communities. But that's going to take a range of different factors, and we have to make sure that all of our candidates are the best possible candidates and that they reflect those local communities, whether that's gender, when it's different backgrounds, whether it's different professions. That's what we need to look at. And it's really, really important that we look at how we can attract those women in particular to wanting to put their hand up for the Liberal Party, wanting to be candidates. And every Liberal MP, everyone who's senior in the Liberal Party, has a role there to play to identify those people, to help mentor them, to help them into the party and ensure that we do have a talent pipeline of strong women who want to put their hand up for the pre-selection process and are well equipped when they do so.
Well, Jess Wilson, thank you so much for your time and have a great weekend ahead.
Thanks, Caroline.
Let's go to the conflict now.